Temporary duty assignments, TDY, can sometimes be fun and exciting, but this one was not. It was 30 days of almost round-the-clock hard work. Every year, the U.S. Army participates in a rapid deployment exercise. Several units from across the Army are selected to participate and are airlifted with all their equipment to Germany, where they engage in a month-long exercise with their NATO counterparts. My name is Fred Sadler. At the time, I was a relatively new captain in the U.S. Army working in the Operations Division stationed at Fort Hood, Texas. This deployment came at the worst possible time for me to be anywhere other than home with my wife, who was pregnant and due to deliver sometime during the deployment. Lydia and I had been married for almost 6 years. When the deployment began, my commanding officer said, "I give you a personal guarantee that I will do everything in my power to get you home before the baby is born." And he did. At the end of the exercise, I packed my things and was about to get on a plane. I called Lydia, who told me she thought she was going to be hospitalized in the next couple of days. "Then the timing must be perfect because I'm on my way home," I told her. It was dusk. I was driving to the airport when a deer ran out into the road. My driver swerved to avoid it, and the next thing I knew, I woke up in a military hospital in Frankfurt. My right arm, right leg, 3 ribs on my side were broken, and my right lung had collapsed. "How long have I been here?" I asked my nurse. 5 days. "Is my wife here?" "No, sir." I called Lydia. "Are you okay?" were her first words. "Don't mind me. How are you, and the baby?" She began to cry. "We lost the baby, Fred." "I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" I asked. "Physically, I'm fine, but emotionally, I'm a mess." 2 weeks later, I was flown home on a medevac airplane. Lydia met me and traveled with me to the Fort Hood Hospital. She was still an emotional wreck, but our time together seemed to help us both. I was in the hospital for another 2 weeks before I was discharged on limited duty. 2 years after we lost a child, we were transferred to Heidelberg, Germany. We spent 3 years there, traveling all over Europe. There, I was promoted to major. After 3 years, we were transferred to Fort Lewis, Washington. Being a major, we were given field-grade officers' quarters. They were much nicer than company grade and had garages, not just carports. When we moved into the cabin in Lewis, all the things we took with us to Germany were sent back. We unpacked those boxes as well as the boxes we had stored and did not take with us. Using a box cutter, I opened one of the many boxes and began to take things out of it. It was the box we had stored things in while we were in Germany. About halfway down was a small wooden box that I didn't remember seeing before. I placed it on top of the stack of boxes and opened it. My life changed forever. There was a small stack of envelopes with a pink ribbon around them. I pulled the ribbon away and picked up the top envelope. It was unsealed, and I opened it. Inside was an official document labeled birth certificate. As I looked at the document, my mind began to fog up. It stated that a baby girl weighing 7 pounds 6 ounces and 19 inches long was born alive, and it included the date. It was the same date Lydia had told me our baby was not alive when born. The baby was named Hope. It went on to say that the mother's name was Lydia Jane Sadler Nee Johnston. Where the father's name was listed, there was a note that said, "Unknown." I picked up the next envelope. It, too, was unsealed. I pulled out a multi-page document. It was an adoption certificate. I read it several times. The gist of it was that a child named Hope, born to Lydia Sadler, had been given up for adoption and stripped of all parental rights. It went on to say that since the identity of the biological father is unknown, his permission is not required. How many men had she slept with in that time? Did she know? She had to know that even in marriage, we need personal space and thoughts. I drove up to the golf course, parked the car, and headed to the 19th hole where there was a bar diner and restaurant. I ordered 2 eggs over medium heat and corned beef hash. This used to be my favorite breakfast until Lydia changed my eating habits. I managed to eat most of it and sat on the deck while the golfers finished the 18th hole and went inside. When I got home, it was the middle of the day. She had made a lot of progress in taking down boxes and organizing the house. I went to my unit and went into the office. There was no one there except the officer on duty. I sat down at my desk and tried to work, but my heart was not in it. When I got home, it was past midnight. She was lying in bed reading. I undressed and took a shower. "I'll sleep downstairs," I announced as I walked out and closed the door. I had just turned on the TV and was getting comfortable on the couch when she walked in, grabbed the remote, turned off the TV, and stared at me. "Cut the crap! Tell me what's wrong and I'll either help you or leave. Which is it? I haven't done anything wrong, so I won't tolerate you yelling at me when I'm trying to help, or having to get out of your way when you try to run me down. I walked over to her, took the remote from her hands, and turned the TV back on. Have a safe trip, I said. She left less than an hour later. On Monday morning, I talked to my commander and told him my story. I even showed him the documents. He was as dumbfounded as I was. What do you plan to do? He asked me. I'm not sure. Did she say where she was going when she left? No, sir, but she didn't take all her things, especially the box. There was a pause before I spoke again. I was thinking of trying to find my daughter if she is my daughter and proceed from there. It would be virtually impossible. In adoption cases, confidentiality is very important to both parties, he said. I understand, but I have to do something. I have to start somewhere, and I don't trust her to tell me the truth anymore. Then I literally jumped up. Oh my God, I have an idea. Can I have the day off? Sure. I saluted and ran out of his office and building into the parking lot where I jumped in my car and drove home. I opened the box, pulled out a wooden box, and dumped the contents on the floor. There was a pacifier in there. A pacifier? Hope must have used it before she was taken. I put the box back together, put the pacifier in a clear plastic bag, and sealed it. I got on the internet, trying to find a DNA lab in the area. There was one in downtown Seattle. I went into the bathroom, but all of Lydia's things were gone. I rummaged through the cabinet under the sink, found her old hairbrush, put it in another plastic bag along with the bag that held the pacifier, and hauled back to Seattle. We'll call you in about 3 weeks, she said. I didn't hear from Lydia for another whole day. Hi, I said. Are you feeling better? Better than what? Better than the idiot you were a couple days ago. No, same old idiot. Why 3 weeks? Exactly. By then I should know if I'm going to eliminate you or just divorce you. I ended the conversation. The phone immediately rang, and I ignored it. The next day when I got home, Lydia was already there. She met my car as I pulled up to the house. She was furious. What do you mean you're going to either liquidate me or divorce me? Exactly what I said. I think I deserve an explanation, she said. Me too. About what? She asked. We were still in the driveway. You mean you don't need to explain anything? I asked. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So there's no hope for us, I said, putting as much emphasis as possible on the word hope. What do you mean there's no hope for us? What have I done? Then it hit her. Oh my God, no, please no. I'll be back in an hour and you'd better not be here. I'll leave for work in the morning at 6:30. I'll be back at 5. By then, all your stuff should be out of this house. I left. I came back exactly an hour later and she was gone. And so was the box and some of her things. When I got home in the evening, the house was almost empty. She had picked out almost all the furniture and taken it away. True, she left my favorite chair and a bedroom set for guests. The next morning, I called my office to let them know I would be late. I then called post housing and arranged for government furniture to be temporarily brought to my apartment. I also called the credit union, our stockbroker, the insurance company, and anyone else I could think of, and went about those mundane housekeeping things that are usually associated with divorce. I then made an appointment with a JAG, Judge Advocate General Army Lawyer. I knew they were not authorized to represent me in civilian court, but they could advise me. They confirmed what I suspected. She would get half. We lived in public housing, so we didn't own a house, but we had enough equity to buy one if we wanted to. Both our cars were paid off. My life continued for a couple more weeks. I went to work, did my chores, mowed the lawn, and washed and cleaned my car. One morning, the phone rang. Hello? I answered. Is that Major Fred Sadler? It is. Major Sadler, this is Margie from the DNA Analysis Center. A few weeks ago, you gave us some samples to test. Yes, I did. Well, the results are in, and you can come in and look at them. Can't you just tell me now? No, sir, I can't. We can either mail them to the address you gave us or show them to you in person. We have no way to verify over the phone that you are who you say you are. We have to see identification. We can mail the results because, as you may recall, we asked you for ID when you were here and we were able to verify your address. I'll be there as soon as I can. I walked through their door, introduced myself, and asked for Margie. She came out and we shook hands. She asked to see my identification. Come with me, please, she said. I followed her into a small room. She asked me to wait. She left and came back a couple of minutes later. She handed me the pacifier and then spoke. Sample A is yours. Sample B is from the hair you gave us, and sample C is from the pacifier. We were able to determine that samples B and C are positively related. Sample A is not related to either B or C. Thanks, I said, took the pacifier, put it in my pocket, took the papers, and left. I got into my car. At least I didn't have a daughter calling some other man daddy. But someone else did. JAG was not authorized to recommend specific law firms or attorneys, but the JAG officer I spoke with was able to provide me with a list of approved attorneys and firms. The next day, I started calling them. I made 6 appointments. At the 3rd appointment, I found my man. He was a retired JAG officer and hated cheating spouses, both wife and husband. I spent over an hour telling him my story. When I got home, it was late. There was a letter in the mailbox. It was from Lydia. Fred, 3 weeks are up. Lydia. Short and to the point. The return address was her parents' address in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. I called her. Hi, Fred, she said. I won't talk about it over the phone, and I'm certainly not flying to Pennsylvania, so I guess you'll have to come here. If you mean Seattle, I'm already here. I sent a letter last week when I was there. I'll be at the house at 6:30. Come over then, I told her. She hung up. I didn't make any special arrangements. No drinks, no cheese, no crackers, nothing. This was supposed to be a business meeting. I put the DNA documents and my copies of the birth certificate and adoption papers on the government-issued coffee table. She pulled up to the driveway at 6:20, but waited until exactly 6:30 to ring the bell. I was in no hurry to answer it. Opening the door, I invited her in and indicated where she should sit. I sat on the couch. She sat in the uncomfortable straight-back chair across from me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a pacifier and held it out to her. She grabbed it and held it to her bosom. Thank you, she said, as if I'd given her $1 million. Then I handed her a copy of the DNA test results. You already know I'm not the father, but this will confirm it. She reached for the results and took them with her left hand. The pacifier remained clutched in her right. I take it you are sample A? She asked. Yes. Then I pushed the rest of the papers toward her. Without saying anything, she leaned forward, read the title on the top sheet, and tears welled up in her eyes. She set the DNA test results aside and picked up the dissolution of marriage application. She started to read it, but the tears were already flowing freely and falling onto the form, so she set it aside. Can I have a tissue? She asked. I don't have any. You're not making it easy for me, are you? She asked. You cheated, I said. She nodded. How many times? I asked. Does it matter? No, I just want to know. One weekend, different men, just one. Who is he? Then again, does it really matter? Again, I just want to know. I think I deserve it. I'm not going to tell you. Do I know him? I'm not going to tell you. So you'd rather protect him than try to save your marriage? She picked up the divorce petition. Our marriage is over anyway. Why ruin it? Okay, but you have to tell me why you lied about your daughter being not alive when born. When I found out I was pregnant, I wasn't sure if it was your baby or his. I thought about getting infanticide, but I couldn't. Over time, I was able to reason that you can't know for sure if it's your baby or not. When we found out it was going to be a girl, I was even more sure you wouldn't know, because there is a special bond between dad and daughter, and I was sure you and her would look alike. As the time of her birth approached, I started to get nervous. Maybe you would find out she wasn't yours. Then you went away on a business trip and my nerves calmed down a bit. I was glad you wouldn't be around when she was born. Then you told me you were flying home and I started to get nervous again. My emotions have been on a roller coaster. Maybe you'll know, maybe you won't. Maybe you'll be there when she's born. Maybe you won't. I was nervous then. She was there, alive and perfect. She was placed on my chest and I looked at her and fell in love. She was beautiful. She had blonde hair and blue eyes. She paused. Just like her father's. You have brown hair and brown eyes. No one in our families has blonde hair and blue eyes. I knew she wasn't yours. She was my daughter, and you were my husband. I loved you both, but I knew I had to choose between you. I chose you. The hospital staff helped me when I told them I wanted to give her up for adoption. Within 24 hours, I had the papers in my hands. They asked who the baby's father was, and I said I didn't know. They said it would be easier that way, because if I knew who the father was, they would have to get his permission. I just bosomed her, and held her in my arms. She was sucking on a pacifier when they brought me the papers to sign. I knew I had to tell you something, so I made up the lie that she was not alive when born and her remains were cremated when you came home. I couldn't believe you didn't ask to see the birth certificate, certificate of pass away, or anything else. I still can't believe it. I trusted you, I said. I had no reason not to trust you. Besides, it was so traumatic that I saw no reason to add to our suffering by looking at those pieces of paper. Eventually, you and I got our lives back to normal, and I was almost happy. But a part of me was missing. It still is. And it gets worse every year. On her birthday, I always took the time to pull out her birth certificate, touch her little footprints, and hold her pacifier. There were times when I wanted to put it in my mouth to feel closer to her, but it had some of my dried bosom milk on it, and I wanted to preserve it, so I didn't. They must have scraped it off at the DNA lab. Oh my God, it's gone. She groaned, then looked at me. It's gone. Her milk is gone, you idiot. You took her milk. She fell to her knees and literally curled up in a ball on the floor. I picked her up and put her on the couch. I couldn't let her leave in that condition, so I covered her with a blanket and went to my bedroom, but not to bed. She remained there for several hours. At midnight, I heard the toilet flush. I went downstairs. She was sitting on the couch. Would you like some coffee? I asked. Yes, please. She sat down at the counter while I brewed her a cup. She took a sip. I guess I got a little cold feet, huh? Sort of. We sat in silence and drank coffee. More? I asked. Yes, please, she replied. Where are you staying? I asked, brewing 2 more cups. At the motel. You were there for more than 3 weeks? No, I was with my parents most of the time. Do they know the truth? No, I lied to them too. I told them that you and I were going through a difficult time and I needed to get away from you for a while. They paid for me to visit them. They think I came back to help sort out our difficulties. She looked around, walked over to the coffee table, pulled a pen out of her purse, sat down, signed the divorce papers without reading them, and left. When I woke up, it was the middle of Sunday morning. I spent the rest of the day thinking. I took the divorce papers to my attorney on Monday, and he filed them. I've been thinking a lot about who Lydia cheated with. She never told me who he was or how the affair started. It wasn't just that she cheated and got pregnant that made me angry. It was that she defended the idiot and wouldn't tell me who he was. The only thing she told me was that it only lasted 1 weekend. Fortunately, I was so busy at work that I didn't have time to think about anything else. 2 weeks later, I was back at Fort Hood where Lydia and I were living when her daughter was born. Usually military seminars are pretty intense, but this one was relaxed. We were divided into groups of 3 to work on a project. It turned out that there were 6 groups of 3 and there were 2 left, a major from Alaska and myself. We developed a close friendship almost immediately. It seemed like we'd known each other all our lives. His name was Keith Franklin, and as I said, he was stationed in Alaska at Fort Wainwright, the coldest base in the U.S. Army. But he loved it there. He was a computer genius, and we were so far ahead of everyone else that we had to slow down and wait for them to catch up. On Friday of the first week, we had lunch at the officers' club. He told me about his personal life. He cheated on his wife, and she divorced him. She is now living with some civilian, and his 2 children call the other man Daddy. Toward the end of lunch, I laid out my story too. When I finished, he had a strange look in his eyes. And you don't know who the man she had an affair with is? No, she didn't tell me. And that was here in Hood? Yes, 5 years ago. It's almost 6. Blonde hair and blue eyes. That's what she said. Come with me. We went to the Manpower Center. Everyone assigned to Fort Hood had to go through it. We walked right into the HR director's office. She saw us, stood up, and went around her desk to give Keith a hug. She looked to be about 60 years old and had a sparkle in her eyes. I liked her, and I hadn't even talked to her yet. Aunt Lucy, this is Fred Sadler. Hi, Fred, she said, shaking my hand. Hello, Mrs. Healy's nameplate on her desk read, Mrs. Healy. I began call me Aunt Lucy. Everyone does. Aunt Lucy began. Keith, do you remember the fair-haired, blue-eyed officer who may have been here about 6 years ago? She thought for a few seconds. No, but I don't always see everyone who passes through here. They all have to, but that doesn't mean I see them. She thought some more. Fred Sadler, you were here around that time, weren't you? I remember that name. Yes, my wife and I were here, I said. I looked at Keith as if asking how she remembered that. Keith looked at me. Aunt Lucy has Sam, and she can remember just about anything she's read, seen, or been involved with. That includes people. She can remember everyone she's ever met. Sam? I asked. Yes, supreme autobiographical memory. It's a state of being. Or a curse, Aunt Lucy interrupted. Or a curse? Keith continued. Very few people have it. Aunt Lucy is Fort Hood's institutional memory, especially when it comes to personnel matters. Isn't that right, Aunt Lucy? Unfortunately. I looked at her, then at Keith, then back at her. You remember everything? Everything that happens to me personally. Jesus, I said. How do you have room for all this? We don't know. It's just always there. Does it have any downsides? I asked. Oh, God, yes. I remember the good as well as the bad. It can cause depression if you allow yourself to do that. I can only imagine, I told her. Aunt Lucy, Keith interrupted again. Fred, he pointed at me. He's looking for someone who was here at the same time. The only thing he knows about him is that he was blonde with blue eyes, she laughed. That's it? No height, no weight, no rank, no assignment, not even his initials. No, ma'am, I said. Calling me ma'am is a waste of good oxygen, Fred. I'm Aunt Lucy. Give me time to think and maybe ask around. Does it matter? Keith looked at me and I answered, Yes, Aunt Lucy, it's important. Oh, he was about the same age as me when I was here, if that helps, and he was in the Army. Officer or private? I suppose he was an officer if he was in the Army. So you don't even know if he was in the service? No, I don't. Or a civil servant? No. I'm sorry, I know it's not much to go on. She laughed. Yeah, there's just nothing to target. There can't be more than 2,000 blonde-haired, blue-eyed men I've encountered in the last few years, but I'll see if I can narrow down the time frame. She took both of our phone numbers. 2 days later, she called Keith. I've been thinking about the man you asked about. I don't remember any blonde-haired and blue-eyed soldiers, either officers or privates, who were about the right age, but I know 2 civilians who work for the Office of Postal Engineers. One has worked there for about 30 years, so he's probably too old. The other has been working there for about 10 years. He's in charge of new construction now, but he used to be the head of the plumbing department. His name is Kurt Weber. There are about 15 other blue-eyed blondes on post, but the ages don't fit. And I didn't bother trying to remember civilians living off base because I assumed that when Major Sadler was here, he didn't have time to make many civilian friends. Keith told me, and I immediately started planning how to meet Weber, find out if he was the right man, and maybe get a little revenge. The men who prey on the wives of our military personnel are the second lowest form of life on the planet. The lowest, of course, are those who prey on wives when the serviceman is overseas. These idiots deserve the worst fate imaginable. The next morning, I was sitting on the next street over from Weber's house in my rental car. I was hoping he was golfing or doing some homemade crafts, so maybe he was on his way to the local hardware or lumber store. I had been sitting there for almost 2 hours when I saw his car pull out of the garage and speed down the street. Thank God, I thought. I didn't feel like sitting here all day to see if he'd gone somewhere, but I was willing to do it if I had to. I followed him to the Home Depot. We parked and I followed him into the store. He was obviously known there because he talked to a few of the employees. There was a spot right in front of the door where there was a coffee urn. I knew enough about Home Depot to know that their regular contractor customers could treat themselves. Weber helped himself and stood sipping his drink while he chatted with one of the salesmen behind the counter. Watching Mr. Weber, I realized not only did he have physical engaging with my wife and make her pregnant, but he chewed gum with his mouth open. Other than spitting on the sidewalk, I couldn't think of anything more disgusting. The clerk Weber was chatting with had to go help a customer, so Weber took one last sip of coffee, spit the gum into a paper cup, and walked away, unwrapping another piece of gum. I walked over to the trash can, looked in it, and saw right on top of it a paper coffee cup with a pack of gum in it. I looked around, didn't see anyone, and took the cup. I got in the car and called Keith. I told him what I had. He laughed and told me to hurry back, that he might have something bigger by the time I got there. When I approached, he was literally jumping from place to place and waving some papers around. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "You won't really believe it." He grabbed my arm. "Look at this." "No, you better sit down." I did. He sat down next to me and put the papers in front of me. "Now look." There were a few names and an address. "So?" I asked. "So what?" "That's Hope's name, address, and her family's name. Her name is Sarah now. Sarah Randolph. I hacked into the files of an adoption agency. Those files are encrypted better than the nuclear missile launch codes carried by the President of the United States. Then he stopped and calmed down. Well, I didn't personally hack their files. My brother did. But it's the same thing. I started to laugh. That's great, Keith, but what exactly am I going to do with it? I have no idea, but you have them. Maybe we can blackmail someone. Oh, that's great. I can already see the headlines. 2 Army officers tried to blackmail a 6-year-old foster child. That's a great one. He tossed the papers on the coffee table and leaned back in his chair. Yes, I see where you're going with this. He got a little flustered again. But we cracked their defenses. That's something. Yeah, that's something, I said, laughing. I carried the papers and coffee cup back to my boat queue and placed them on the desk. I have no idea why I did it, but I looked up the address where Hope lived and drove there early Sunday morning. It was almost 200 miles to Corsicana. The house was a typical suburban house. I sat outside for about an hour observing American suburbia on a typical Sunday. The noise of a few lawnmowers, the screams of children, and the chatter of neighbors. No activity came from Hope's house until almost noon. A car pulled up to the driveway. There were 3 people in the car. A man was driving. A woman was in the front passenger seat, and a child was in the right rear seat. The woman got out of the car, closed her door, and reached for the right rear door. I was at the ready with my cell phone. The woman removed the child from the car seat and placed the child on the ground, then knelt down to straighten the baby's dress. I had just enough time to take a few pictures. I heard a noise next to my car. A woman and a child were walking by. Sarah! The child next to my car squeaked, and she ran towards another child who I realized was Hope and ran towards her. They were only a few feet away from my car, and I took a few more quick pictures. I started my car and drove off before either of the 2 women became interested in the strange car and man parked on their street. I drove a short distance away and stopped to look at the pictures. 4 were absolutely perfect. I could even make out her blue eyes. I drove back to Fort Hood the following week. Keith and I finished the course with ease. We graduated on Friday and then had dinner and a few drinks together. Saturday morning we went to the airport and flew home, Keith to Alaska and me to Seattle. The following Monday was a school day, so I had the day off. I took Lydia and Hope Margie's DNA reports to the DNA testing center. She didn't remember me until I reminded her about the pacifier. I gave her Lydia and Hope's DNA results and handed her a coffee cup with gum. See you in 3 weeks, I said as I left. In fact, it only took 2. This time she gave me the results over the phone. It's a married couple, no doubt, she said. Mother, father, and child. She would send me the official results in the mail. Okay, I had all the information I needed. But what was it for? What was I going to do with it? All it did was confirm that Weber was, in fact, the guy Lydia had cheated with. I went to Walmart and bought paper and envelopes. I also made copies of 2 photographs of Hope in the DNA reports belonging to Weber. Lydia and Hope. On the DNA reports, I cut off anything that could tell where the report came from. I put it all in an envelope. I made sure I had gloves on. From the moment I opened the bag of paper and the box of envelopes made copies of the photos and DNA reports. I even used self-adhesive stamps and water not saliva to seal the envelope. I made every effort to keep it untraceable. I addressed it to Mrs. Kurt Weber at their home address. I also included Lydia's name and her parents' address because I had no idea where she was. Then I drove to Seattle's main post office and dropped the letter in the mailbox. I had no idea what would happen in Killeen, Texas home of Fort Hood and the Weber family when the package arrived. The news from Killeen was a little over a month old. I got a call from Aunt Lucy. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want an honest answer, she said. I'll do my best. Whatever you're doing isn't good enough. I need complete honesty. Is that what you and Keith did to Weber? Aunt Lucy, I don't mean to sound smart, but what did we do to him? Set him up so his wife would file for divorce? Okay, here's what I did. Keith had nothing to do with it. I told her the truth. Most of it anyway. I omitted Keith's part. You certainly stirred up a hornet's nest. Apparently when his wife received your package, she didn't know if your DNA was his or someone else's. So she did it herself. She took some of his DNA and sent it off for processing. She also sent the profiles of that woman and the baby. They matched. And that's where it all went downhill. Who was the woman he was flirting with? She was my wife, Aunt Lucy. Oh, Jesus. I thought it might be something like that. Well, he was brought into the office yesterday, and he's not thrilled. He was ranting and raving all over the base. Good. Hearing from you that his marriage is over is the best news I've heard in a while. I just feel sorry for his family. It was over for me. Lydia and I were divorced, and Weber was on the road to divorce. I folded all the papers Keith had given me into a folder and put it in a box with other things I no longer needed but kept anyway. My life was moving on. Over the next few months, I went on a couple of dates, but nothing much happened. 2 years later, I returned to Fort Hood. I was surprised because I expected to be sent overseas like 90% of my classmates. Once in Hood, I found myself in Aunt Lucy's office. "How did you get back here?" she asked. "I have no idea." "Yes," came a voice from the past. It was newly promoted Lieutenant Colonel LTC, Keith Franklin. He walked into the office, closed the door, and we shook hands. It turned out I needed an assistant, and a major who had just graduated from CNGS was just what I needed, so I asked him. Keith and I had talked a few times since we arrived at the seminar, but hadn't seen each other. I was glad to see my friend. After registering, I took a vacation for 2 weeks. The first thing I did was to look for a house. Lydia and I had been saving up to buy it. I assumed that she would get half of it in the divorce, but since she didn't show up in court, I got everything. The branch manager walked by. He introduced himself as Dwight Randolph. We moved here about 6 months ago and settled in a brand new neighborhood. The houses are very nice and inexpensive. You get a lot of value for your money. He told me this, then went to his office and returned with a business card from the agent whose services he had used. I called her, and it only took me 3 days to find what I wanted. I paid more than half of the down payment, and the bank was happy to finance the rest. I started working with Keith and moved into my new house. The first things I bought were a bed, a chair, a big TV, and a lawnmower. I was spending my first night in my new house. It was already dark outside, and I had no curtains or drapes. There weren't even enough sheets to cover the big front window. I had just opened a beer and was holding a slice of pepperoni pizza in my hand when the doorbell rang. I had long since gotten off the no red meat diet Lydia had kept me on. I opened the door, and there stood a woman. "Hi, neighbor," she said. "My name is Samantha Randolph, but everyone calls me Sammy. We live in the neighborhood. We haven't lived here long ourselves, and I just wanted to say hello, introduce myself, and tell you that if you need anything, just ask." "Is your wife here?" I smiled. "Fred Sadler. No wife, divorced." I saw her frown. "But don't worry, I don't throw loud wild parties or even soft wild parties." She smiled. We chatted for a few more minutes before she left. The first week in my new home flew by. On Saturday morning, 3 women rang the doorbell and brought food. They also brought decorating ideas. They'd seen my empty house with the lights on at night. As I sat in it with nothing but a chair, TV, beer, and pizza, they decided it was time to help me. The ringleader was Sammy Randolph. A couple of hours later, I had a slightly worn but nice leather couch, a dining table and chairs, and a small coffee table to keep the pizza off the floor. The ladies were about to leave when 3 small children came running in chasing each other. One of the ladies, Ruth, grabbed 2 of the children, and Sammy grabbed the third. "Calm down, Sarah," she said, kneeling beside the child and brushing her blonde hair away from her blue eyes. "This is our new neighbor, Major Sadler." "Hello," she said confidently. "My name is Sarah." I leaned over. "Hi, Sarah," I said, looking into her piercing blue eyes. Blonde hair and blue eyes. I shook my head. "How old are you, Sarah?" "I'll be 7 soon." I stood up and we all said our goodbyes. As soon as they left, I went to the room that was to be my den, found the right box, opened it, and pulled out a folder. In it were the pictures I had taken. It was the same baby. I hadn't paid attention to the names of the foster parents before, but now I did. The adoption papers named Dwight and Samantha Randolph as Hope's adoptive parents. Sammy and her friend mostly decorated my house. It took a few weeks, and when it was done, we had a neighborhood open house. Sammy invited her sister-in-law, Joni Payne, who happened to be divorced. I hadn't enjoyed female companionship in a long time, and Joni and I hit it off right away. She was the last to leave the party, and I couldn't wait to call her. The next day we met for lunch and had dinner with Dwight, Sammy, and Sarah. Sarah was brief because she wanted to go play with her friends. Over the next few months, we were together as often as possible. The first night we spent together was very good. We were sitting at the kitchen island when the doorbell rang. I threw on my robe and went to answer it. It was Sammy. "Good afternoon, Fred," she said as she walked inside. "We were wondering—" She saw Joni. "Well, what do we have here?" she asked, heading toward her sister-in-law. Joni was sitting on a stool eating a ham and cheese sandwich. As Sammy approached her, she set the sandwich aside and turned to face her sister-in-law. Her robe was open, and Sammy reached up to close it. Joni laughed. "Too late for modesty, sis. He's already seen everything. In fact, Never mind," Sammy said. I left the room and went upstairs to get dressed. When I came back, they were still discussing my bedspread. When they saw that I was dressed, they fell silent. The following weekend, Dwight and Sammy asked Joni to watch Sarah while the two of them went out to dinner. We were in the backyard watching Sarah in her sandbox. Without looking at Joni, I said, "She's a beautiful child, isn't she?" "Yes, she is." "Did you know she was adopted?" "Really?" "Yes. They've had her since she was born. According to the adoption agency, the birth mother was married, had an affair with a man she doesn't even remember, and got pregnant. Her husband was in the military. She didn't want him to find out about her affair, so she gave Sarah up for adoption. Dwight and Sammy were there to take her home. Sarah is the name her own mother gave her." "No, that name was Hope. It's on the birth certificate." "But Sammy and Dwight changed it. Sarah suits her better." "What happened to the birth mother and her husband?" "I have no idea. The adoption agency closes their files very tightly. They don't give the birth mother access to information about the adoptive family and vice versa." Sarah came over and wanted to sit on Joni's lap. She leaned her head against Joni's and fell asleep almost immediately. A few minutes later, Joni asked me to carry Sarah into the bedroom and put her to bed. It was my first time touching her, and I felt very uncomfortable. I gladly laid her down. 7 months later, Joni moved in with me. A year after that, we were married. We had a very happy year until the Army intervened. We were told we were being sent to Germany for 3 years of service. We took 2 trips to the States, one when her father and Dwight's father died, and the other for the reunion. Both times, of course, we saw Dwight and Sammy. We saw Sarah at the funeral. But when we went back for the reunion, she was at camp. After 3 years, we received orders to go to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I was going as a new LTC assigned to the post headquarters as an executive officer under the post commander. This was normally a position for a colonel, not a junior lieutenant colonel, but I didn't mind. In the military world, you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. To help me get settled in the staff, organized a series of briefings with the various departments that support the post. One of the briefings was to be given by a postal engineer. Representatives from that department, as well as the postal engineer himself, were already in the conference room when I arrived. I sat down in my seat at the table and watched as a blue-eyed civilian stood up to begin his speech. His hair was slightly blonde, but with a touch of gray. He introduced himself as Kurt Weber. I just stared at him. He had been talking for an hour, and I hadn't heard a word, and my gaze never left his face. It was obvious that he was uncomfortable with me looking at him. At the end of his speech, he asked if I had any questions. "Tell me, Mr. Weber, have you ever been to Fort Hood?" "Yes, sir. I was in the engineering department." "Did you like it there?" "Yes, sir." "Why did you leave?" "It's rather personal, sir." "You are correct. I withdraw the question. I just like to know about the people I work with. I seem to recall a scandal at the Fort Hood engineering department a few years ago. Do you know anything about that?" "I vaguely recall something about one thing. There was someone cheating, if I remember correctly." "Ah, well, I just remembered something. Thanks for the briefing. If you need anything at headquarters, feel free to contact me. Just in case you forgot." I pointed to the name tag on my uniform. "My name is Sadler, Sadlar. Fred Sadler. I wouldn't want you to forget it." I was still looking straight into his eyes, and I could see the light bulb turn on, and his eyes get huge. Kurt Weber became several different colors, ranging from red to pale gray. I got up and walked away. In the afternoon, I learned that Mr. Kurt Weber had requested a transfer. Unfortunately for him, this request had to go through me. When I received it the next day, I wrote in large letters, "Response: I have plans that involve Mr. Weber's expertise. He will play a key role in the realization of these plans." The next day, to the surprise of almost everyone, Mr. Kurt Weber tendered his immediate resignation. I signed it. Every day, I fell more and more in love with Joni. I watched her become increasingly beautiful and hot. Every morning I looked in the mirror and saw an aging, middle-aged man, wondering what she saw in me. But whatever it was, I was grateful for it. We cherished our time together, and years flew by much faster than I wanted. We were stationed in Alaska and traveled to Killeen to visit Sammy and Dwight. On our first evening, they told us about a decision they had made with Sarah, who was almost 18. She had always known she was adopted and was now interested in finding her biological parents. Dwight and Sammy supported her decision, but the adoption agency offered no help, citing compliance with the law. All we heard that first day was how outdated the laws were and how they needed reform, especially since it's important for an adopted child to know their birth parents' health status. They decided to use a website dedicated to DNA and ancestry. They sent Sarah's DNA and waited to see what happened. Sarah hoped her biological mother could attend her high school graduation, but since it was only a couple of weeks away, they doubted it would happen. That night, Joni and I were already in bed when she asked, "What are you going to do?" "About what?" "About Sarah." "What about her?" "Come on, Fred. Married couples don't have secrets, or shouldn't have any. I found your little file 6 months after we were married. She can avoid DNA testing if you tell them everything you know." "Oh crap," I said. "Yeah, oh crap, why have you been silent all these years?" "I'm not sure. I guess I knew how sensitive you'd be about it. And Dwight and Sammy didn't need to know, so I kept quiet, but now it's become important and you have to address it. Any suggestions on how I can do this?" "Just tell the story, I suppose." "How do you think they'll take it?" "Dwight is my brother and just like me, so he'll take it. Normally Sammy is the dark horse." "Okay, tomorrow. We'll get Sarah out of the house and tell them." She leaned over and kissed me gently. "Do I ever bore you?" she asked. "What a silly question," I said. "Of course you don't. Why did you even ask?" "Because you haven't touched me all day." I grinned and reached for the buttons on her pajamas. "I can fix that right now." The next morning was Sunday. Sarah was picked up by her best friend and they went to the mall. I gathered the four of us around the table, took a deep breath, and began. I started by telling them that Joni and I had packed our things before we went downstairs, so we were ready if they wanted to kick us out. They looked at us, and Joni shrugged. "Sarah doesn't need to give DNA to find her biological parents." "I know who they are," I said. The looks they gave me made it clear I needed to explain, so I told them the whole story. When I finished, I took a deep breath and looked around the table. Dwight just stared at me, while Sammy had tears in her eyes. After a few seconds, she stood up, walked over to me, took my hands, pulled me into a hug, and said, "Oh, poor guy. Living with that all these years and not being able to talk about it. No one deserves that." She hugged me again. "What do you think, Dwight?" she asked her husband. "I'm trying to calculate the probability of how we all ended up together. I don't think there's a big enough number." "So what do we do now?" asked Sammy, returning to her chair. "I think Fred should contact his ex-wife and invite her to the prom since Sarah wants her there," Joni said. "Yeah? Why me?" I protested. "Because you started it," Dwight grinned. "But who's going to contact Weber?" "Not me," I said, and told them about the last time I saw him. "You never told me that," Joni said. "I didn't realize you knew the whole story." "Did I?" She leaned over and kissed me. I love this woman, I thought. Later that day, when Sarah returned, Dwight and Sammy told her about it. She was both nervous and excited and wanted us to continue. The only way I knew to contact Lydia was through her parents. If they were still alive, if they still lived in Mechanicsburg, and if they still had a landline. I waited until Monday morning and talked to a private investigator. I asked him to help me find Lydia's parents and Kurt Weber. It took him 2 hours to get the parents' phone number. It took longer to find Weber. I called Lydia's parents, reminded them who I was, and told them I needed to talk to Lydia. I gave them my phone number to give to her. Not an hour later, my phone rang. "Hello, this is Lydia Bowman. I was given this number." "Hi, Lydia." "Fred?" "Yeah." "How's it going?" I asked, trying to think of something clever to say, but I couldn't. "Actually, I'm doing great. How are you?" "Very well. Lydia, I need to talk to you about something very important." "Okay, go ahead. Not over the phone. Tell me where we can meet, and we'll talk in person." "Explain it to me. We haven't spoken in years, and suddenly, out of the blue, you have something so important that it needs to be discussed in person." "That's it." "I'm sorry, Fred, I'm not buying it." "Okay, but remember I gave you a chance." "A chance at what?" "Come on, Fred, what's the matter?" "Only in person, Lydia. Call me if you change your mind." Wait, okay. Damn it. We live in Vegas." "That's better. I'm flying out there tomorrow, and I'll call you when I land. You decide where you want to meet. The next day, we met in the lobby of the Bellagio Hotel. I guess she needed a lot of witnesses. Hi, Lydia. Hello, Fred. This is my husband, Roland Bowman. Hi, Roland. I turned my attention back to Lydia. I need to see you alone for 10 seconds. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Roland. Whatever you say. But this is about the hope you had. She turned pale. Can we still talk? Yes, he knows about her. Okay, let's sit down. We found as quiet a corner as we could. Given where we were, I recommended something to drink. Wine will do. We agreed to a red, and I ordered it. Let's wait while we get some poured into our glasses. I paid for the wine, and we all took a sip. Her name is Sarah. She's graduating in 2 weeks and wants you to be there. Roland and I watched her faint with a glass of wine in her hand, not spilling a drop. Roland took the glass, set it down, and patted her cheeks until she came to. What did you say? I repeated it. Then I pulled out Sarah's picture and showed it to Lydia. She started crying, gently touching the picture. She's beautiful. Where did you get this? I took it yesterday in her living room. You took it? How? Why? I told her the whole story from beginning to end, including our failed attempt to find Kurt Weber. She didn't know I knew his name and was shocked again. Initially stunned, she quickly grew really angry. Why didn't you ever tell me? Why did you keep her from me all these years? Her voice got louder and louder. Roland jumped up. Calm down. Calm down. You gave up all rights to her. Fred is breaking the law by doing this now, so chill out. She calmed down. When can I see her? At her graduation if you want to come. Of course I'll come. Can't I see her sooner? You both need time to get used to it. Take your time. How about we get there the day before? She smiled. That would be wonderful. Now, how about I take a picture of you so she can see what you look like? Okay. We found a spot outside for her to pose. When I started to leave, she rushed over, hugged me, and kissed my face and head. Not too demonstrative, is she? Asked Roland, laughing. I decided I liked him. That same afternoon, I flew back to prepare Sarah. I showed her a picture of Lydia. She's beautiful, Sarah said. She was very nervous but excited at the same time. For the first time since I'd known her, she hugged me. Thank you, Uncle Fred. Now we know where you get your beauty, said Sammy, snuggling tightly against Sarah. Do you know what my birth father looks like? Sarah asked timidly. The other 3 adults looked at me with widened eyes, waiting to see what I would say. I thought for a moment before I spoke. Let me tell you that you got your blonde hair and blue eyes from him. The 3 adults breathed a sigh of relief. We had only taken a week's vacation, so I had to go back to Alaska, but Joni stayed behind to help everyone prepare for the big day. I left for Alaska, promising to be back 2 days before graduation. The day before I was due back in Killeen, I got a call from a private detective. The most he'd been able to find out about Weber was that after leaving government service, he'd taken a job as a consultant to the government of a Middle Eastern country. Like several other American consultants, he disappeared shortly after arriving in country and has not been seen since. I met Lydia and Roland at the airport and drove them straight to Sarah's house. When we entered, she was standing in the middle of the living room. I let Lydia go first. They looked at each other for a long time. Then Lydia spoke. I brought you this, she said, pulling out a pacifier. It belongs to you, and I thought you might want it back.